Almost. Major. Holy fucking shit, this is major!
So I double featured this with Reefer Madness, and I think I like Reefer Madness a little bit more, only because getting high and playing piano is fun, which feels like a more accurate depiction of drug use to me than anything Requiem for a Dream.
I've actually never seen Reefer Madness.
Me neither.
It's it's bad. It's boring. It's even for like a movie that's like an hour long, it drags. But like the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh my god, this rules, because they're just saying how like marijuana is like so much more dangerous than heroin. Like, and the ending. They literally are pointing at the camera, and it's like, it could be you or you or you. Like, you totally see why it became this cult phenomenon. And the story behind it is interesting because you guys know NORML and know RML, the sort of pro-marijuana legalization group that had like sprung up around the 70s, I think, or 60s or 70s. Fact check me on that. But the head of the group around the early 70s was doing research on prohibition and early marijuana, prohibition. So he was in the Library of Congress, and he found the film that way, which was originally called Tell Your Children. And he viewed it because he was just trying to get a sense for what the propaganda was like. And he was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so around 1972, he does a college tour where he brings the film around to colleges to promote the marijuana legalization cause and shows Reefer Madness. And that's how the cult catches on. And then at some point, New Line, when they were early in the early days, picked it up for distribution and put it out as a midnight movie, and that sort of was it. And that's how the Reefer Madness cult came around. Uh-huh. But I just think I finished Requiem for a Dream, and the first thing in my mind was like, I haven't watched Reefer Madness in a long time, and I think they have about the same level-headed approach to drug use.
Well, even there's like the scene, and I'm sorry, Kevin, I'll make your point and I'll make mine. But
I was just going to say, did you hear that? I believe the wrestling bell has rung. I believe that's what I just heard.
Kevin, you're going to need to pump in so many like air horn sound effects, like dun, 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 dun.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. I'm going to have
for this episode.
JR and the King Lawler just doing color commentary the entire time. Yeah.
It's going to be a this is a tag team wrestling match, me and Bryden versus Kevin and Charlie, just going at it over whether Requiem for a Dream is a good movie or not.
Except me and Charlie are fighting with love, and y'all are fighting with hate, and love trumps hate.
Oh, Jesus
Trademark.
Christ.
Copyright.
Yes. Bryden, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say about like one question I actually wanted to ask about the Reefer Madness is like, you said it was originally called Tell Your Children. Do you know who like came up with the idea of Reefer Madness, like calling it Reefer Madness?
I don't know. That I didn't do enough research into it to find out when the name change happened.
I was just curious.
It's just one of those. Yeah, no, totally. But I just imagine it's just one of those common things where they would re-release movies all the time under new titles just to see if it did a little bit more money. So, that goes back decades. It's just it's almost funny that we don't do it today. You'd think with the internet it would be more common.
The only two that I can think of is when Birds of Prey was in theaters, they changed the name, and Edge of Tomorrow. Yes.
Live, Die, Repeat. Yeah. That's the one time, but it's still called Edge of Tomorrow. They just made the tagline big on the box for the DVD release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the only time I can think of. I know like plenty of movies when I'm doing research, it was just like, well, it was known as this, and it was known as this, and then they released it as this, and it's just like, when you do that, it's just like, just accept the loss. It's not going to happen.
It's funny to me when you like, I don't even remember the title of it. It was like the worst movie I saw at Sundance in like 2015. It was called Bound to Vengeance, and they completely changed the name because it had a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's so stuff like that. I think after like once like word of mouth people start writing about this is the worst movie at Sundance, they're probably trying
to
a little different. It's a little different, but that's one thing I can
think
of where they're like, what?
That movie, that movie, The Black Coat's Daughter, was originally called February, but they
Yeah.
changed it because
Good
if
movie.
you Google February movie, what are you gonna find?
Right.
It made it impossible to Google, so they changed it to something that wasn't just the name of a month.
Little Sally Draper grew up so fast in that movie.
I kind of like that movie. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember it being pretty creepy. The one I remembered that like they changed the title of. I had to look up what the later title was. Was the Paul Feig Ghostbusters was later marketed as Ghostbusters:
Answer the Call.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I don't know
They
how
should just
that
call it
helps.
They just need to officially call it Lady Ghostbusters. Like, I don't even think it's it's not an insult to call it that. It's just what it is. And I think that's
If it
what
was
everyone
released
calls it
in the
to differentiate it.
70s, it would 1000 be called Lady Ghostbusters.
We were riffing on this the other day, though, where it's just like that used to, again, be the trend, where it's like you take a male, like a male lead movie like Terminator or Scarface, and then you're just like Lady Terminator, Lady Scarface, like, which are real movies. Look them up. Or like
Lady
The Invisible
Scarface is a
Woman.
movie? Okay.
Oh yeah, it's like I saw it on TCM like years ago. It's not good. It's not worth it. But
Yeah, I don't care. I'll see you guys in an hour and a half. I gotta watch Lady Scarface. Sorry.
it's a ripoff of the 30s Scarface, not the
Right.
not the Al Pacino one.
Oh,
but,
that sucks. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just like, I mean, that I just think that we should bring that naming scheme back. I mean, we probably shouldn't because we don't need to reinforce the gender binary that way. But it is just funny. It is just funny when they're just like, Lady Terminator,
I
Mrs.
wonder-
RoboCop.
That would be really funny if they just called Benedetta Lady RoboCop.
Lady Billy Madison. I think like something like Lady Scarface or something like that. It sounds like when or Lady Ghostbusters, they put it overseas and they're just like, we're gonna call it Lady Ghostbusters or something.
And is it
that.
like all sexist dated archittypes of like instead of cocaine she eats cheesecake all day and like everything's pink?
Charlie.
Sorry.
This was a fine conversation.
No, but just you know what I'm getting at.
the
I'm
wrestling
not
bell
saying.
went off, but now the problematic light is on and we're getting shut down?
Look, I'm acknowledging that like the movies themselves when they did shit like that were problematic.
Oh yeah,
It
yeah.
is the nature of exploitation cinema, though. Like, it's literally exploiting. Like, that is where the name comes from, is to exploit a trend into
I watched Cannibal
social
Holocaust. I watched Cannibal Holocaust, and a lot of people are doing stuff that are not good in this. Like, I thought this was an upstanding movie about cannibals.
Brad and I saw that at the Coolidge like 6 years ago for a midnight.
Holy fuck!
And
Oh, that was the second time I saw it, and I fell asleep that time.
it's funny. Our programmer Mark Anastasio like introduced it and is a huge horror person, and I like left to go to the bathroom at one point, and I saw him out there. I'm like, "Oh, you're not watching this?" And he was like, "I don't fuck with this
Why?
movie."
Yeah, no.
Yeah, nah,
He's
he's
like,
like,
even
he'll
for me,
book- he's like-
Jesus, like.
Yeah, he'd like book like Cannibal Ferox or whatever, and he'd just be like, I'm not
I've seen
watching this
that.
shit.
Was it a
Yeah.
film print or
Yeah, it
DCP?
was
Oh
a- it was
yeah,
film
Cannibal
print.
Holocaust. Well, I originally saw it at Coolidge before I ever worked there too. I think probably around like 2011 or so. It was a midnight, and I went and saw it then. So that was when I saw it. And I was like, I thought like I was a little nervous going in, and then I was like, no, you know what? It's so old. It's got to be like cheesy or hammy or whatever.
It's still
And then
fucked,
it,
dude.
No.
It,
Few
it shook
movies-
me, and I was like, Jesus.
Few movies make me as queasy as that one. The poor turtles in that movie. All the animals, really, but the turtles in particular
Yeah.
is what really churns my stomach.
Yeah, but then I but I went that second time because it was just like, fine, I'll go see it again, and then I fell asleep. I was
Yeah.
too tired.
Thankfully, the DVDs and the Blu-ray have like a cruelty-free version that like it cuts out all the animal cruelty, so it's like 3 minutes long. But the score for that movie is like strangely beautiful. Like, it's really weird.
Yeah,
Just like I really love the score. But yeah, I haven't seen that since like 05 or 06 and don't really have a desire to re-see it. But
No, it's not worth it.
this is Almost Major, where we talk about the many major studios and the films they released. We are still with Artisan with another Aronofsky movie. My name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm here with Charlie Nash
Howdy.
and Bryden Doyle.
Hey,
And back again is Brad Avery.
Hello.
And we are here to have a wrestling match about Requiem for a Dream from 2000. Premiered at Cannes in May 2000, showed at TIFF in September 2000, and opened October 6, 2000 in New York and LA before extending on November 3rd, upwards of 93 theaters. Number one that week of October 6th was Meet the Parents, as well as Remember the Titans, Get Carter, the re-release of The Exorcist, and Digimon the movie. Yeah. I believe it placed number 49, so yeah.
This might be a controversial statement, but I find Requiem for a Dream to be more pleasant than Meet the Parents. I have never understood why people love that movie.
I kind of still like it, but I haven't seen it in forever. But, yeah, I don't know. Was that the beginning of De Niro being a funny guy?
Yeah, I
No,
think
analyze this.
I think
analyze this.
I think it's
right.
because it is such generic PG-13 broad comedy that I find it so deeply irritating and unpleasant. Like it's not like it's not like, and it's not like anyone goes into that movie for realism, but it's just like, I don't know. And then Meet the Fockers is even worse. Jesus.
Meet the Fockers is truly terrible, yeah. But I mean, I also haven't seen Meet the Parents in like 10-15 years. I'm just going off of quotes that I remember that make me laugh. But the budget for this, much more than Pie's $60,000. It's $4.5 million. Domestically, it made $3.6 million. Worldwide gross of $7.3 million. Again, directed by Darren Aronofsky, adapted by Aronofsky and Hubert Selby Jr. from Selby's novel of the same name. The very strange plot that Google gives is a quick rundown. Imaginatively evoking the inner landscape of human beings longing to connect, to love, and feel loved. The film is a parable of happiness gloriously found and tragically lost. I'm not watching this movie that they're describing. Requiem for a Dream tells parallel stories that are linked by the relationship between the lonely widowed Sarah Goldfarb and her sweet but aimless son Harry. The plump Sarah, straight from
Sweet
Google.
but aimless is how they
Plump?
describe Jared Leto's
What?
character.
It literally,
terrible.
I know, it literally says the plump Sarah, galvanized by the prospect of
plump?
appearing on a
That feels like really mean to Jennifer Connelly. First of all, not true. Second of all,
No, it's to
Sarah-
describe.
is that one
to
Bernstein?
describe?
Oh, for a second I thought you were talking about Jennifer Connelly.
Either way.
Either way.
Oh, yeah.
That's
She
She
also
read this
terrible.
Google description, and that's why her character goes down the path that she does.
That is true. Tabby Timmons is actually just a vehicle for
But
Google.
like the whole point of the movie is that she's overweight by her standards, not by our standards. Like that's just the whole point. Jesus.
This plot description is the reason now. The plump Sarah, sorry I had to say it again, galvanized by the prospect of appearing on a TV game show, has started a dangerous diet regimen to beautify herself for a natural audience. This sounds like you got to get the page limit on an essay in class. It kind of feels like that. But 4 people dealing with drugs and the withdrawals and the downfalls of that. That would have been a better description. Ellen Bernstein.
That last sentence was all you really needed.
Truly, yeah. I saw the plump Sarah and all of the fancy words they were putting in there, and I was just like, yeah, let me read whatever Google's doing. Ellen Bernstein was nominated for a Golden Globe and an Oscar for her performance. She won a Independent Spirit Award, and Matthew Libatine won for Best Cinematography. Starring Mr. Jared Leto as Harry. Prior to this, he was in My So-Called Life from 94 to 95, Fight Club in 99, American Psycho the same year as this. After this, he showed really what being damaged is when he starred as the Joker in Suicide Squad 2016, won an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club in 2013, played Luigi in House of Gucci last year. Ellen Bernstein as Sarah, prior to this, won an Oscar for Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore in 1974, was in Exorcist 1973, Last Picture Show 1972, has been working since 1958, and continues to work. We all ran out and saw Queen Bees from last year with her and James Caan.
She's come back as Christopher Maloney's bipolar mother in Law & Order Organized Crime. She's still on the show.
Charlie, we have to do a whole episode about you and Law and Order,
Oh.
because this is something that I have never seen one episode of Law and Order.
Oh
It's-
God, Kevin, you would love Law and Order.
it's
You would like it.
delicious
I know.
trash.
It's fun.
It's so terrible, which is why it's great. It's been on for like 20.
Especially SVU. SVU is like the peak trash. Like it. Which is crazy because it deals with like the more darker shit.
It's all
but then
about
it's like the trashier show.
Yeah, it's mainly about sexual assault, and yet it's been on for 22 seasons, and America continues to watch because it's become such a freak show. Like,
Okay,
And they get like good guest stars too. Like they get like really good actors to be in it. Like I think the one episode I saw like the whole way through was like one with like Rosie Perez and like Jim True Frost, who played Perez on The Wire. Like they're like
what?
Yeah,
Honestly, what you should start doing is just start connecting all the actors in these movies you're covering back to their Law and Order.
Oh,
appearances,
we
because
do.
probably 80% of them have.
have any of you seen
We-
the,
like,
been on the show.
the Isabelle Huppert
The first
episode?
3, yeah.
Oh my god. Isabelle Huppert's episode with Sharon Stone is just... mwah. Oh my god. It's outrageous in the best possible way.
Anyway, who else is in Requiem for a Dream? Jennifer Connelly's in Requiem for a Dream.
Oh yeah, one last
Marlon
thing
Wayans
about
is in Requiem for a Dream.
one other thing about Bernstein is she works again with Aronofsky on The Fountain, and she was on Law and Order. So yes, I believe our first 3 movies all had actors that were in Law and Order for one time or another. So you really can't escape it. But Bryden, what?
No, I was also going to say the other actor that recurs throughout, that's in this movie and recurs throughout Aronofsky's filmography is Mark Margolis, who plays the guy who's like takes the TV at the start of the movie and like gives it back.
Oh
to the person.
yeah. He
and
plays Saul in Pie. Yeah.
Yeah, and his character's name is Mr. Rabinowitz, and the editor in this movie's name is Jay Rabinowitz. So that's like must be like Aronofsky's little Easter egg, or maybe that's a character in the book, but it's just like kind of a funny like parallel, or I guess it's just sort of shout out.
Yeah, Marlon Wayans as Tyrone. Prior to this is the Wayans Brothers show. Same year, the masterpiece Dungeons of Dragons and Scary Movie. After this, a bunch of comedies. He also dipped back into the drama field of On the Rocks in 2020 and Respect in 2021. I was listening to the WTF podcast about the interview with him, and he's like classically dramatically trained. He just chooses to do comedy. So like I looked and like Dave Chappelle was offered the role and turned it down, but I think Marlon Wayans is pretty phenomenal in this and shows off his dramatic chops. Jennifer Connelly, the last person we'll talk about, is Marion. Prior to this, she's in The Hot Spot in 1990, Dark City in 1998, which also has a scene of her on a pier at the end
In a red dress.
with somebody. Right. After this, teams up with Aronofsky again for Noah, House of Sand and Fog in 2003, and won an Oscar for A Beautiful Mind in 2001.
Oh wow.
Trivia. I have a lot. I'll go through as fast, but please chime in. Ellen Bernstein says this is her best acting achievement. I agree. I haven't read the book, but Aronofsky in the director's commentary says the movie is a very faithful adaptation. Some of the changes, including the scene where Marion and Harry break into the building go to the roof, isn't in the book. He said he just needed something to kind of show their romance before it all starts. Sarah doesn't watch Tabby Timmons in the book. That was the creation of Aronofsky. She was like, I think she just watches random soap operas and talk shows and whatnot. The phone call with Harry and Marion at the end isn't in the book. It was also improvised. In the book, once Harry leaves for Florida, he never talks to Marion again. In the book, Harry and Marion want to open a coffee shop. And the book takes place in the Bronx, but Aronofsky changed that to Coney Island because that's where he grew up. And the author said it's all New York, so it doesn't matter. Jared Leto stated in an interview with Rolling Stone that he would shoot up water while hanging out around real-life junkies, and said shooting up anything was intense and he would never do it again.
No, he didn't.
He's the fucking worst.
That's
What an
bullshit.
idiot.
Someone needs to do something about this man.
If you injected yourself with water, let's just be clear. Like, you would be like instantly going to the hospital because you are not supposed to do that.
If you shoot up an air bubble by accident, you would be dead. I mean, like he's not.
He did not do this.
Like-
He's full of shit. But of course, it just totally tracks that Jared Leto would say that though. Like,
I also I will say, his performance didn't used to bother me here, but he this time around watching it, I love how half of his performance is just shouting "Ma!" Like he went to the Ma.
Why you gotta make it do this to me, Ma?
Ma, who's pulling your leg?
Yeah.
we'll get into the accents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll get into what I think of those accents.
This is a big trivia thing, but I can just sum it up by saying Tabby Timmons says there's 3 steps. We never learn what the third step is. It was originally supposed to be no pharmaceutical drugs, but The company was like, don't say that because that might be targeting or encouraging people to avoid taking medication. The third step was changed to no orgasm and is filmed as such, but Aronofsky edited the footage so Sarah would either start to daydream or feel the effects of the drugs and be unable to hear the third step.
Can I just say...
I don't know why.
Sorry, I'm a little confused. Tabby, is this the weight loss regime she's doing in the movie?
Yes.
Christopher McDonald.
Can I also
Shoot
just
him
say
again.
that it was very funny to me this time around that Jared Leto like gets her a super nice TV just so she can keep watching this shitty show. It's like so garish. Like she doesn't even change the channel once this whole movie.
And the establishing shot of like the TV, it's like something. I think there's literally an episode of Frasier where like the whole joke is they keep shooting the TV from like this super high angle because of how big it is. So I just thought like this is like a Frasier gag, and I cut to the TV.
Yeah. I also, because I've been watching too much Simpsons recently, I just thought it would be really funny if she was watching like Itchy and Scratchy and starting to lose her mind.
Don't make me have to do more edits. Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
I'll do it. God damn it.
Oh god.
Marlon Wayans had to audition 5 times to get the part. Aronofsky originally wanted Giovanni Ribisi to play Harry.
That would have been terrible. I like Giovanni Ribisi, but holy crap, that's a guy who like
coming off of Boiler Room. Yeah.
If you don't rein him in something like Sam Raimi's The Gift, it can be just like disastrous.
I completely agree. A little Ribisi goes a long way.
Connolly got the role immediately after auditioning. Bernstein was first disgusted by the script and declined to do the movie. Her agent, or somebody, I forget exactly who it was, told her to watch Pi before making her decision, and she said 10 minutes into Pi that she decided to make the movie.
I just got an image of Ellen Burstyn in my head just being like, this is disgusting, and slamming it in the trash.
And then somebody was just like, here's a VHS of Pi, and she's like, that's pretty good. 2 more quick facts, and then we'll get into it. The film got an NC-17 rating, but Aronofsky refused to cut anything as he felt it would undermine the message, so decided to release the film unrated, which I don't know how an unrated movie would kind of travel farther than the NC-17. I feel like you probably should have just kept the NC-17 because you're going to get the same amount of theaters as the NC-17, but regardless.
You might get, I mean, it's weird. I don't know all the politics about that, but do you also remember that when Blockbuster got it, they had to put out the edited R-rated version that's like 2 minutes shorter so they could sell it in like Walmarts and because Blockbuster refused to carry NC-17?
Yes, and the title card even has, like, when it comes down, Requiem for a Dream, it says, like, edited version, and I'm fairly certain he had no partake in that. That was Artisan that edited it. Sean Gillette.
We determined Gillette.
Yes. Got upset with Aronofsky on the day that they shot the scene between him and Jennifer Connelly at dinner. Gillette had prepared a lot for the scene, but Aronofsky felt the only thing the scene needed, even more important than the dialogue, was Gillette's character eating steak. Gillette ate 5.5 steaks while filming this scene.
Oh my god. For a second, I was like, why was he upset? Did Jennifer Connelly just improvisationally stab him with a fork or something? Just didn't warn him that she was gonna do that.
That'd be pretty wild. Sorry, I'm a method actor. You know, I shoot up water and I stab people with forks. What are you gonna do?
Purple in the morning, blue in the afternoon, orange in the evening. Just like that. 1, 2, 3, 4.
You know what we need to do? We need to get us a piece of this Brody shit, cut it up, and off it. Double our money, easy.
That's what I'm talking about, baby. No hassle. You just watch my back, and I'll watch yours.
On our way, baby. On our way.
Hey, Ma, you want uppers?
You don't know. I'm gonna be on television.
Gotta win.
I'm somebody now, Harry. Everybody likes me. It's a reason to smile.
Let's do this right, man. All I'm saying is we should take a little taste so we know how much to cut. It's business. Fair enough.
Getting the money is not the problem, Harry. I don't know what I'm gonna have to do to get it.
This is our last chance to get back on track.
You promised me that everything was gonna be okay, remember?
I'm gonna be on television.
Okay. A moment of truth. Initial thoughts. Let's go Charlie, Brad, me, Bryden. So, Charlie, start us off.
So, I can't be objective with this movie. I mean,
Yes, you can.
I mean, it's hard for me too because it was like I would say if you asked me what at 15 years old, like a few months before I saw Mulholland Drive, like what my favorite movie was, I would have said this in high school. So like, I've seen this movie so many times. I understand every criticism that is made about it being a bad PSA or the MTV style editing, but it all still really works for me. And I think it has to do with, the most of the performances, not including Leto's. It's an assault. I mean, it's an assaultive film and it's blunt and Aronofsky's never subtle, but for me, it wields a very idiosyncratic kind of power that I find to be quite moving. And like it is one of those, it's so, like whether or not, I think the fact that it makes such bold choices that at age 15 I had never really seen before just really made me fall in love with it. And I think that, I like the cinematography. I love the editing. I love Burstyn's performance in particular. I think, it's difficult for me to really have... I feel like so much of my thoughts on this movie are nostalgia-based for when... I mean, this thing was huge for me, too, in high school. Like, it came out around, a time I was in high school where I hadn't seen... I think this is my first NC-17 movie. And I was starting to get into more films that were more for adults than just, your standard teen slashers or, torture porn shit that I was watching that was as a kid. So, like, I mean, I do. I still have a really soft spot for this movie. And I know whatever criticisms Brad and Bryden are going to bring up are probably valid, but I can't deny that, this film was pretty foundational for me. So.
And next in the ring, Brad Avery. Want a good clean fight.
All right, well, I'll preface this by saying this is by no means my criticisms of the movie are by no means reflections or judgments on you, Charlie.
Oh,
or
no.
Kevin.
Of course not.
No, you hate us. You hate us for loving this movie. You absolutely hate us.
Requiem for a Dream is Reefer Madness by the way of Crash. It is treacly attempting to manipulate your emotions. Like I always say that all movies are manipulative, and when people use that word, what they really mean is a failure to manipulate. Like when someone says that they think Titanic is manipulative because the score swells, what they really mean is that it's failed to manipulate them effectively, and that is Requiem for a Dream to a T. It is trying to make you feel, anguished and cringe for these characters who are just lost in drug addiction, when really I don't think Aronofsky understands the realities or the intricacies of addiction at all. I think that he is applying his basic little motif of obsession, which we talked about in the Pie episode, throughout all his films, and trying to apply it to something that is a physical disease and something that really tears apart people's lives. It's not just a matter of like, oh, I am driving myself to destruction for the sake of my art because I must wrestle or because I must do ballet or because I must do this or that or I must solve this math equation. It is a real physiological crisis. And I think Requiem for a Dream does a disservice to actual sufferers of substance addiction because I just find everything about it to be this melodramatic, like, saccharine, like, bullshit. I think the whole thing is applying this MTV style editing tricks, the bumpers that you would see between, music video ads with the, the stop motion and the little obnoxious sound effects, and in applying it to this, this subject matter that Aronofsky is completely out of his depth with handling. All the performances are terrible and overly melodramatic, and the fact that Ellen Burstyn, a great actress in maybe her career worst performance, and I do think that if this movie were made today, just because it's so graphic, I understand why at the time it was controversial and couldn't really be touched by the mainstream. But if it was released today exactly as is, it would be nominated for Best Picture, and that is not a compliment.
I want to mention one thing real quick. Wouldn't you argue that all of Darren Aronofsky's films are about addiction now?
Yeah, but I think it works when he's kind of dealing with, say, artistic devotion or with, more sort of philosophical concepts like in Mother, which again, like I know I'm in the minority for really loving Mother.
Oh, I love Mother
and it's
too.
weird that I actually like, and we talked about, I like all his other films like a lot. Everything else that I've seen, I actually am a big fan of Aronofsky, and this is the one where I just think, but it doesn't work here. And the reason specifically is because I think he's dealing with a serious issue of addiction, specifically heroin addiction and opioids, so I think that is where it really falls apart for me, is in applying it to something that is, by all means very real and serious. And so maybe I'm just, getting a little sensitive about the subject matter, but I do think that's why Pi works, Mother works, Black Swan works, Requiem for a Dream does not work.
So, before I get into my praise, does it matter as far as how you feel about Aronofsky approaching the movie if it's mainly a faithful adaptation of a guy who wrote it about his own heroin addiction in a certain type of way? Does that make it seem more garish, or that he's not taking it more seriously or anything like that?
I guess the problem here is that I don't know enough about Selby himself, and I haven't read the novel. I sort of glanced at the pages, but I think that's a problem. We can't really judge it there. So yeah, Selby had a hand in the screenplay, and he's drawing from his own depictions. I think it's more in the style as well, and in where it's being presented. So here's the thing: is like something like the opening scene of the film, where the opening scene has Jared Leto trying to pawn his mother's, Ellen Burstyn's, TV set so that he can go buy drugs and go score. And she's screaming, please, no, not the TV set. And that opening scene, actually, I do find pretty effective, because I think it's a very, one of the more realistic elements of the film, where it's a really kind of grueling personal moment. It's someone in, in the early throes of their addiction before it really, hits rock bottom, but like, beginning to do stuff like, say, sell your mother's TV set so that you can go score, and then, say, it's okay, I'm going to go get it, I'm going to buy it back. That is, I think that scene in particular does work at the beginning of the film, because it is sort of a real moment. But I think it's in the direction, and I think it's in the performances where it starts falling apart for me, where it gets too cutesy. It gets to stuff like, Ellen Burstyn's having breakfast, and, she chomps away at the food, and it just kind of cuts to this, the food is eaten. There's these really stupid sound effects of like munching food. She has these visions of cupcakes and black and white cookies flying at her.
Yeah, it's funny.
Dreams.
Yeah, it's funny.
And that's where it starts really losing me. And then it as it gets into the darker elements at the end of the film, it feels exploitative in the wrong way. And so I think that's a fair question, Kevin, is like the fact that Hubert Selby Jr. was writing from his own personal, his own personal place, his own experiences, and did co-write the screenplay. But I think it's the execution that all my issues really lie. And I can talk more about that. But please, I actually, so that's enough of my issues. I really actually do want to hear like your praise and like why you love this movie, on not responding to me, but just I want to know
right
for it.
I just wanted to, I want to say some stuff before I jump into what sounds like hyperbole, but as somebody who at the most has been an alcoholic, has never done drugs or been addicted to drugs, or anything like that. So I'm not coming from it as a like, well, this actually happened to me, so who are you to like? I have none of that whatsoever. And as far as going with the praise that Charlie has as well, I can be objective with it. I can. There's plenty of movies that I loved as a kid that meant a lot that I go back on and I'm like, this is absolute garbage. I can't believe I thought this was good, i.e. Crash. So, which is my least favorite movie of all time. So you saying that really hurt. No. I mean, I'll just go out the window. I think it's a fucking phenomenal movie. I think it's one of the best directed movies I've ever seen. I think it's one of the most directed movies ever, which I understand that's a crutch for people, but I love, I hate when people say like, oh, it's like this movie on steroids and it stuff like that, but it really, with the editing, I can see how it seems kitsch or cutesy or whatever, but I really, really love how it shows just the utter involvement of addiction and how it can go from one way, it can be slowed down, it can be really fast, it can feel like everything's on top of the world. There's great music playing when you're indulging in your addiction, and then when it hits rock bottom, there's Clint Mansell just having some of the best score ever. I guess maybe me saying the hyperbole type things make it sound like I can't be objective, but the last few times I've watched it, I was just like, okay, have I grown out of this movie? I've seen so much, like I've seen so many addiction movies. This has got to be like I thought this was deep, but it's not anymore. It's still wholly phenomenal to me. Ellen Bernstein has one of my favorite performances of all time. Jared Leto's accent is very funny. And just all the side characters are Ellen Bernstein's doctor who never looks at her. That always just really gets me. And how when he comes into the room, there's no hallway behind him. It's just like there's nothing. It's just like this guy that comes in just to not even care about her, give her drugs, and then get out of her life. It just always stuck with me. And Jennifer Connelly's incredible. Marlon Wayans is incredible. I'll say more, but I'm already getting wrapped up in talking about it, so.
Yeah. So I saw this, I think, for the first time a couple of years ago when it was available on Prime. I knew, like, the general plot beats of it. I think I'd heard about, like, the infamous sex party scene near the end of the film. I'd seen, like, videos about it. And, this movie, like, has always had, like, kind of a notorious reputation as, like, a movie that, like, oh, it's, like, so difficult to watch that, like, you don't want to see it, like, another time. It's funny that people say that because I think it's really only like maybe the last 20 minutes of the movie that are like the hardest part to watch. Everything else before that is pretty standard, I would say. That's like a more subjective thing for me to say though. But I don't know. I didn't really like this movie the first time. I didn't like it this time either. I can see like I won't deny that there are parts of it that like do sort of appeal to like the primitive parts of my brain where like I do like electronic music and like quickly cut montages. Like some of that, like I do like some of the Clint Mansell score, like this score that plays when they're first like shooting heroin is like like that's terrible impression. Sorry.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's a pretty good piece of music. I think it is propulsive in a way that I do find effective, but I think the problem that I have with this movie is that Aronofsky's like tendency to like just like shove your face in like all like the quick edits and the split screen montages and like the overbearing sound effects that like are like kind of kitschy sounding. Like there's like the whole montage, like Brad, you mentioned like the crunch sound effects when like Ellen versus eating breakfast. There's also the whole montage where Marlon Wayans and Jared Leto are dealing drugs on the street, and it's like you hear like a car alarm, booms,
that's so good,
swishing swords. It's just like it's just like kind of, it just feels like really random. And also it kind of, the effect that this movie has where like it's dealing with like these really awful problems and putting its characters to the ringer. But like it's the problem that I have with this movie is I think it's actually like a pretty badly written movie, like from a dialogue and character standpoint. I don't think my problem with this movie is that the characters suffer so much but are so thinly written. Like there's very little to them as people,
yes.
as human beings. Like Marlon Wayans, his one thing is like he has like a flashback where he runs to his mom and she says like, I told you I was gonna make it. She says all you have to do is love your mother. That's basically the entire backstory you get for his character.
I will agree that Marlon Wayans certainly gets the short end of the stick when it comes to the 4 main protagonists. Yeah,
and you know, I don't think the performances in this movie are all that great, but I also cannot imagine, like, I feel like even the most seasoned actors would struggle with this material that is like so thinly written. Like Marlon Wayans, I actually think like there are moments where you can see him trying to create like a character, like when he's like reassuring Jared Leto that like they're gonna like that, like if they like test the product that they're gonna be dealing, like it's just business. Like there's like kind of like this crinkle in his forehead that does like sort of like hint at the anguish that's going on in this character, who is very charismatic. You can imagine this movie, these actors giving good performances, but the writing just betrays them at every turn. And I also think that like in order and like, so that's like what makes the suffering, especially in like the climax of the movie, like just like so, it feels so cheap and weightless. It doesn't really feel like the destination is worth the journey at all. It just feels like you're putting, I mean, I was thinking about this earlier. It's kind of an apt analogy. It's like putting pincushions in like, you know, a doll and everything. I mean, like needles, like literally pricking the characters with needles. And like, that's really it. Like they're dolls. And then, the editing too, at a certain point, because the writing is so thin, like that, like also like hits home how hollow like the aesthetic stuff is. It's kind of like distancing you from the characters, like either like viewing them from like high angles or like just aestheticizing their drug-induced state without really giving them like there's not really a whole lot of depth I see, like, or motivation behind the edits other than making it look cool or vaguely trippy. That's my opinion. And I also think and like it's just like also like I think the points that Aronofsky makes, and look, I'm gonna lay my cards on the table. I have never like I don't really drink. I've never done any drugs of any sort, not even weed. And Brad, you were joking. I mean, I don't know. I guess you could see it as like facetious. You saying it is like this is like reefer madness, but yeah, but like it's. I mean, there is like the scene where like Leto like is smoking a joint, and maybe it's laced with something, but like he like smokes the joint and then like has like a full on hallucination of someone at the end of a boardwalk, and I'm thinking I don't even smoke weed. I don't even think I don't think that's how weed works.
I was thinking no, it does not work like that. I actually. That scene bothered me this time around too. Also because of the way it's edited, because it makes it seem like he's on Adderall or speed, because he's like, it's like he's listening to music really like vigilantly and running around the house.
It's like time lapse, yeah.
But I'm just assuming he's crossfaded.
I'm assuming
with
he's
like
that's what I always thought.
Yeah. But I agree. I mean,
that's the dream.
Yeah. I agree with that. Some of the editing choices did bother me this time around. I mean, there's also the shot of after the big, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, the scene where he goes to visit Ellen Burstyn and then he's in the back of the cab and he's crying, and then it implies that he shoots up in the cab. Or that he...
It's New York, baby! Yeah. It's New York, baby! Come on.
That I can actually believe.
Okay. But wouldn't somebody say something? I don't know. It was the 80s.
Cabbies have seen it.
Yeah, that's true.
I will say that's not one of my problems with the movie.
I mean, I'm going to defend the writing here a little bit in that I like the fact that by the time we know them, they're already addicts, and it's not like showing them...
Right.
And it's not tying their addiction to some superfluous or meaning. I mean, like, I kind of like just the hints that Jennifer Connelly doesn't have a good relationship with her parents, and they pay for her therapy and they pay for her apartment, and that's kind of all we really need. We don't need a big scene of like her confessing how she was abused as a kid, and that's probably why she's on heroin or something like that.
No, that's not what that's, to be clear, that's not what I'm saying. But like, yes, even if they're in the throes of addiction, they're still human beings. And like, there's like just like I feel like there's no personality to them whatsoever. Like, it's like she wants to maybe do fashion. Leto, who knows what that guy wants to do, and like Wayans, he loves his mom. Burstyn wants to be on TV. It's just like they really only have like the one character trait. And my problem too is that like there are hints of a more interesting movie you could make about how addicts are dehumanized by like institutions. Like, I mean, especially as you get near the end of the movie when like, you know, Jared Leto goes to Florida and his arm is falling off from like, you know, drug use. And instead of like a doctor, Dylan Baker, helping him, he gets like the cops called on him and taken to jail, like showing how drug abusers are criminal.
He also grabs all of the other drugs that are available, which is a shot I actually really like.
And that's interesting. And there is a movie to be made about how these institutions don't treat these characters as people. Like, they just, like, sort of want to cast them off and, like, you know, just keep them, you know, chained up or, like, you know, lobotomized practically. And but, like, I think, like, it just, like, rings as a little bit false, because I don't think Aronofsky really care. It's the writing gives the impression that, and like also the constant like aestheticization where like it is just like viewing these characters in these stylized ways, it makes it seem like he doesn't really care about people. You mentioned Mother earlier, and I don't really like that movie. I find it kind of annoying in one note, but like that movie, at least it feels a little more honest for me, because Aronofsky is viewing characters like as like symbols and everything while putting them through the ringer. For me, like that feels like a little bit more honest, whereas this, I feel like to make this movie work and to show how dehumanizing, you know, these institutions are, and also like, you know, like I feel like you would need a more empathetic humanist approach. Like I mean, a good example of a movie that's like about sort of similar milieus is a movie we actually talked about in our Artisan miniseries, our Xmas, the Abel Ferrara movie, where it does view these characters with like sort of a lack of judgment and shows their flaws, like whether it's like their prejudices, their criminal backgrounds and whatnot, but also like shows how they could end up in these positions, and also like shows them as having individual interests with family lives and relationships and, you know, moments of humanity as well as moments of menace. There is like a sense of nuance in a movie like that, because I guess Abel, you know, without knowing too much about Abel Ferrara's filmography, I feel like there is like a little bit more of an empathetic approach there, whereas Aronofsky, I don't think really has that approach. And I watched The Wrestler as catch-up for Aronofsky to like get context on this, and I feel like that movie works better at showing how characters can like get sort of betrayed by institutions and like cast off to the side, and like while also having downtime to like show them just like living their day-to-day lives and having relationships and being human beings. I think part of that is because Aronofsky didn't write that movie, and also his approach is much more restrained and kind of on the level of the characters. That approach, like that approach with that sort of similar material, as well as like addiction in that movie too, is explored. I don't know. It just sort of clarified my issues of why I find Requiem for a Dream so hollow. I'll stop for now because I have other points I want to say, but that's
I'll actually, you know, one little point, you know, speaking about the characterization is I largely agree that most of the characters are one note. But in favor of the movie, one thing that I do think about that I actually kind of like is a little character moment is you mentioned that the scene early in the movie where kind of establishing the romance between Jared Leto and Jennifer Connelly when they go up to the roof of the building and they're sneaking around. Brady, I noticed you were kind of yes, and then you went to a little no, so I'm curious what you were thinking of. But the scene that I'm thinking of, though, is they go up to the roof of the building and they're sneaking back past security, and they get to the roof and it's all fun. They're having it, and then Jared Leto, as a joke, just sets off the alarm. And
it's Jennifer Connelly.
Escape.
Yeah,
Jennifer Connelly.
Oh, Jennifer Connelly sets it off.
Right,
Okay,
right.
well, I either way, that's the thing I actually do like about that moment in the movie is it does remind me of people I know, at least, when we were like in high school or college, who would do that, who would totally be like that, because like I'll admit, it doesn't make me sound cool, but I was always the one that was like, guys, like let's quiet down, let's not get caught, like let's be cool.
Oh, so you were cool. Yeah.
No, I was the dork, but like when people are drinking or smoking, or whatever, like they. The type, a lot of the young kids who would do that would be the types that would be like yelling or shouting, being like, "Why are you telling me to quiet down? We're just having a good time." It's like because the RA knocked like 5 times already, and they're gonna fucking bust us if you don't shut the fuck up. But like that moment in the movie reminded me of that. Reminded me of people I knew who were into drugs, who were into maybe not into harder drugs, but at least were very into drinking like heavily and all that. And so that was a character moment that rang true for me in favor of the movie. Mm-hmm. Again, it doesn't overshadow everything else that I have issues with. But Brian, I was curious because I was saying character moment early in the movie, and it seems like you were thinking of something else. I'm curious what you were thinking of.
Yeah, a couple things. Brad, I was sort of in a similar position as you in high school. I was often the one who was like telling my friends to quiet down and be like, "Okay, thanks, mom. Like they'd like call
I know we're all happy to be outside of our parents' house, me especially.
I'm like all for like getting high and shit, but I'm just like let's try not to get busted doing it. Like,
yeah. The moment I thought you were going to talk about was the moment with Mark Margolis, this guy who like takes the TV and then gives it back to Ellen Burstyn. That was like the moment I thought because like I do actually think like there are like there's like some pretty good location like. I have a problem with like the context of like a lot of like the shot choices in this movie, but I actually like think like some of the location work is actually pretty good. Like at the boardwalk where like they're smoking, like and like they have like the golden sort of rays of light shining. Yeah. Like there are individual shots in this movie I like, and I like. But my problem with this movie too is that like there's like hints. I guess maybe being an addict like maybe narrows your world and like in terms of who you interact with, but like there are like hints of like a fringe sort of world or like an underground world that are like kind of more interesting, like the drug dealers who like operate out of the back room of like a grocery store, or like Mark Margolis who like takes people's TVs and then gives them back, and kind of it's implied he's known Burstyn for like a long time. But like I also wonder the adaptation, so like I'm curious to know like how closely this hews to the book, but like the dialogue, it seemed inconsistent with me, kind of the tone of it. It sometimes will be really stylized. Like Mark Margolis has the line early on, where it's like he says to Jared Leto, like, "Oh, your mother needs you like a moose needs a hat rack or something." And like there will be scenes like that where characters will talk like that, but then it will be like super stylized and like kind of like hard boiled almost. But then like they'll just be talking regularly throughout the rest of the movie. It seems like kind of a weird adaptation. And also I wonder too with like the writing of the book. I wonder with the book if you're able to like have like if voiceover narration in a book where like you can like go inside a character's head, maybe that's where like the character details are fleshed out a little bit better, and like maybe it follows the same plot trajectory, but like the character, you get a little bit more interiority, and maybe that's like a little hard to translate in a book because you don't want to just have voiceover the whole movie. Yeah, that's my thing I wanted to say.
Right. To talk about the one noteness of it all, I mean, yeah, I just always seen it as that's like it's the point. Like, I mean, I'm trying to talk my way through this because I don't have any notes, so I can't sound as eloquent. But it just feels. I think in other movies where I would ding something for being one note, I am very involved in it in this movie because it seems like the one noteness is. Like if we were to compare it to The Addiction of Pi, which, you know, it strings out to a bunch of other different people and how he thinks and blah blah blah. I just think it's kind of the one noteness is the point of it, where it's just like all that exists is this when you're in addiction, and you know it just never really bothered me because I mean I think Ellen Bernstein's character is actually really. Has a lot to dig at more than anybody, especially her part with Jared Leto when she's sitting down and talking with him. It's so fucking heartbreaking. We'll talk about it more when we get to it in the plot, but I mean, yeah, it's just if with her, like I feel the most with her, and also there's a scene at the end when you know. The rock bottom is hit for her, and two of her friends go to see her, and they cry on the bench afterwards. That really, really hits home. For some reason, it's not like I've even dealt with this, but my girlfriend was saying, well, because you've never dealt with addiction, that's who you latch on to is the people that have to react to it, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, and then like of course, like Jared Leto and his girlfriend and his friend are. You know, they just want to sell drugs and whatnot and spin music and have parties, but it's just like I mean that's enough for me. Maybe it's I don't see the one noteness because it's so overly edited and directed and all of that, and I just treat it as like it's just such a packed to the gills movie, which I know can be annoying to people, but I mean it's just like it's got voiceover, loud music, split screens, this and that. It's like it's like bursting at the seams of a movie, what a movie can do, and I can totally understand that that's just like, you should probably just tone it down a bit, but I do love just the loudness of it and how it just is relentless and whatnot, which we've talked about how Aronofsky is not one to be subtle or slow.
Yeah,
so
I agree with you, Kevin. Like, I totally understand why this type of style would drive people up the wall, but I think... It was I especially reacted to it so strongly when I was younger. Well, because I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but Darren Aronofsky doesn't behave. And I just kind of admire that. Like, he doesn't, like, I think you can argue like no one can mistake this for being anything other than an Aronofsky movie. I think even if you hate
Oh,
this
yes.
movie, you can't really say any other movie about drug addiction looks or feels like this. And if you vibe with it, you just Bryden's kind of squinting. Like what are you?
I mean, I guess if we're just thinking of like music video-esque stuff, and I mean, I haven't seen this movie in a while, so
Spun.
I haven't seen Spun, actually.
Well, yeah, or I that was not the one I was gonna say. I haven't seen Spun, but I was gonna say Trainspotting, which like has like the music video cuts and like the quick editing and like sort of like the hallucinatory like trippy sequences. I like that movie a little bit better, and I feel like that one like is a little bit more nuanced and cares about its characters as human beings,
Sure.
even though it is like so ridiculous in some parts, like but like intentionally so, because I think that movie is like darkly comedic a lot of the time.
I guess. I also guess in terms of the one-noteness and who are these people, what are their lives. I mean, I know it almost feels like a cheap shot to make, but like even in college, I was smoking way too much weed in college, and like it got to the point where I was like smoking weed 3 times a day and was like barely going to class at one point and had to drop out for a lot of different reasons, not just smoking weed, but also just dealing with depression, really severe depression. And it really does become your whole life. Like it's all that you care about. It's all about the next there's that scene where Jennifer Connelly is like sweating and is just like, oh come on, we need to get off, and then the next day they're just pissed because they're making excuses for themselves, like he's gonna pick up, we're gonna get it, and then they don't get it and they freak out. I mean, like I even had friends in college who like I was the guy who wanted to go to the movies all the time, and like so many times we'd make plans to like go do something, and I had friends who got high off of something and they'd just be like, no, let's just chill here and listen to music, and it's just kind of like it does become your whole life.
We did that for the past 8 days, Brian.
Like, I mean, kinda, yeah. Like I started to break away and was kind of like, well, fine, I'm gonna go fucking see a movie or go to a concert or something, and like, it's. I agree with you, Kevin. I think that Ellen Burstyn has the most depth and growth and character development. I also just think that what makes her story so tragic is she's just scammed. She's scammed by the television, and she's scammed by, the pharmaceutical industry, which continues to, especially in the 80s, that was a huge problem. And I think that could be the make or break for whether or not you love or hate this movie, is if you think he's being empathetic, if you think he's being a sadist, or
I think
both.
he's 1000% being empathetic.
Yeah.
I think I love how these, I mean, disagree, but I don't think he demonizes them at all. I think he has a lot of love for them. He treats them as people, not just drug addicts that are gonna do this and go steal stuff and all of that. It's just like you feel understood of why they do the things they do, and it never feels out of malice. And I think that's really, really shown when Jared Leto leaves his mother's house, and you see how much he loves her and wants to change her, but he literally cannot do anything outside of just feed himself, and how heartbreaking that is.
Even small things. Sorry.
Oh no, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, I kind of come down in the middle there, where I don't think he's demonizing his characters, but I do think he's taking a little bit of delight in his sadism with it. I do think there's a little bit of a rubbing your nose in how far these people fall in and sort of so here's I was trying to kind of get into this subject. And so there's sort of 2 angles to where I'm coming at this film from. And one is that, obviously I've had people in my life, affected by addiction. I don't, feel like it's not worth going into it, both for personal reasons and because it'll be too much of a bummer. But like, so like there is sort of personal elements, but also I also kind of done like a bit of a study on addiction in film, and I actually wrote like a undergrad thesis on alcoholism depicted throughout different eras of Hollywood filmmaking, and I sort of focused on 4 different films for that. So like I've done some actual research into sort of the various depictions of addiction on film as well, through narrative storytelling. So I sort of see it. The tropes, basically, sort of recognizing a lot of the ways the tropes are depicted. And I just sort of see the fall of these characters going so far that it just feels so much like the same type of Hollywood PSA style, Crash style, like they have to go so far in their depths in order to, to hit rock bottom. And I think that it's hard when you actually get to real life where, certain addicts, certain people in recovery rather, will tell you that, like, yes, I did have to kind of go that far, or, yes, it was like that. And others will tell you like, this is, way over the top. This is, it was different ways. But to me, it's like, I think you look at the different outcomes of the characters and you sort of see the archetypes throughout film history. I think, in particular, you look at Jennifer Connelly's character, who falls into the creepy sex party, doing sex work, and that's just such a common trope within these films. Going back decades, of women addicts, female addicts, always find themselves in positions of having to perform sexual favors to give up their bodies in a sexual manner, turn to sex work in order to get the hit. It's always sexualized. It's always gendered in that way. And you see that in a number of films. You see that in Days of Wine and Roses. You see that in Sarah T, Portrait of a Teenage Alcoholic. You see that in countless films of just, women, being degraded, and in the camera showing them in a degraded manner to be like, this is debasing of the characters.
The other thing too is it's there's a racial element too, where like the rock bottom for Jennifer Connelly's character is that she has to sleep with a black guy. That's like, and other movies have done it too. I mean, people have Knock on Traffic, which comes out the same year, where like that's like Erica Christensen's rock bottom. People have criticized how like
that's a good point. Yeah,
people have like said like that's pretty bad, and it's a shame also that they cast an actor who's as great as Keith David in like such a nothing role. Like, I mean, that guy's like charismatic, like reading a phone book and everything, but it's just like it's just like I don't know. It's really, it feels weird. And again, you could make go ahead.
No, Brian, please finish that.
And I mean, I guess you could. There's like maybe a potentially unpulled thread here about like sort of like the racial privilege of like a character like Jared Leto and everything, where like he and Connelly talk about how like they're relying on Marlon Wayans to have the connection to get like the drugs and everything for them, the white characters and everything. But like then I don't know, the movie almost, I don't know if it's maybe because like there's like, again, I don't think there's enough depth in the writing, but like it occasionally seems like it falls into the trap of like blaming some of like the pitfalls in the characters on the people of color and everything. Like, like Marlon Wayans is the one who suggests that they test the product, when Jared Leto is the one who says, hey, maybe we shouldn't get messed up when we're dealing and everything. And like or when they go to like the grocery store, you see it in the scene, it's a black character who pulls out the gun and like and causes the deal to go awry and everything. Is like the movie, I don't know if I'm maybe having bad faith on Aronofsky and everything, but combined with that, and also like the Keith David character being the rock bottom for Jennifer Connelly, do you think this movie is potentially racist to its black characters and blaming the problems on them? I don't know if I'm maybe out of line, but yeah.
No, and so I'll throw it to you guys in a second, but I was going to just throw on top of that, Marlon Wayans is, character is another element of the film, when, talking about the racialized element of it, where he obviously, the film is sympathetic to him. I agree. Like, it's sympathetic to him as one of the four protagonists, but he's the most underwritten of them for sure. Mm-hmm. He's the one who has kind of the least defined character. And I do think that there's a bit of it almost is that when you actually look at a lot of these addiction narratives and you actually think about them, when you start putting race into the lens, so many of them are about white people who fall into the throes of addiction, and black men, black women who fall into addiction, or other minorities as well, very rarely show up in the same way. I think, the addiction drama, as we think of it as a genre, focuses primarily on white characters, often on middle-class white characters. So these characters are lower class, are impoverished, but...
well, Jennifer Connelly's parents are rich, and they talk about how her father's in the garment industry making underpants and stuff, and that's how she's able to live like a pretty nice lifestyle. But yeah.
It also makes
although obviously...
that's how they get the money for all this very expensive drugs. Is,
sure. For sure.
I just thought about I think these are obviously completely fair criticisms that especially when I was a teenager, you know, in a predominantly white suburban neighborhood, wasn't even like thinking about. And I agree with you, Bryden. They did strike me as much more troublesome now, because race is on its mind, and it's also just kind of tangentially brought up whenever it's convenient. I mean, it's not. It's clear, like, I mean, Marlon Wayans is called the N-word in prison by, like, you know, prison guards. So it's clear it's clear that the movie is acknowledging racism. It's acknowledging, you know, Marlon Wayans has connections because there is, you know, there's turf wars going on between, what do they say? I think they mentioned it as the blacks versus the Italians or something like that. So
exactly. Yeah.
Race is on its mind, but it's never the film's. It's never a priority. I think the film is more, and I can see why you can think about this to a fault. I will say, Marlon Wayans does look really good. Like, there is that sex scene between him and his girlfriend that is pretty, like, it's hyper stylized, but, like, it's not, like, you know, I wouldn't say that that's grotesque or anything like that. Like,
no.
You know, it's not filmed in a daunting way, or, like, they're so high, they're having the best sex of their life. It's genuinely just them making love. So, like, I don't know.
Right,
like,
and to counteract the other sex scene, well, we don't see the sex, but between after sex scene with Harry and Marion, where it's a split screen between both of them, and it's just like, I mean, if somebody were to say, like, well, once you get to the end, like, oh, this movie is anti-sex work or anti-sex, it's like we get two, you know, fairly beautiful scenes involving sex with these characters before. Which, that's not even sex, that's sex work, and that's a completely different thing.
We also just weren't talking about race and sex work, like, in the ways that we are in 2020, which is why I think people who see this movie now probably view it as a dated time capsule. And
Maybe.
To be honest, I bet Darren Aronofsky was like, I'm trying to tackle this, but if he brought all this stuff up with him, he would probably say I wasn't even considering that or something. Like, I mean, I can't read the guy's mind, but, like, I bet all this stuff about, like, you know, I don't know if he intentionally cast Keith David in that role because he was black, you know, like, it's like, maybe he just cast Keith David because he's Keith David, but it doesn't mean that you can't raise an eyebrow at the same time at this decision. Yeah. So it's like, it is one of those things that it is thorny in those aspects. Like, I don't think the film is racist. I think it might be a little tone deaf when it comes to dealing with race, if that makes sense.
I mean, I am trying to think of just sort of like a difference between, like, a character who is a drug addict versus a you know, addiction drama where the focus is on the protagonist whose, you know, drug addiction is sort of you know bringing them down. The only two I can really think about that star you know, black protagonists are Flight and Clint Eastwood's Bird, the Charlie Parker biopic, because that's true to life. I can't think of too many others. I mean, it's a very white genre, at least from Hollywood's perspective. But not thinking about foreign
Waves
films.
has
I haven't seen Waves.
Are you talking about, like, the main protagonist in movies that...
I'm talking about, like, main protagonist or at least a significant character, rather than, like, someone who's, like, a character trait is that they, you know, are a heroin user or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
because I was, you know, like I sort of been defining the heroin, the addiction drama as sort of the trope of the genre is that it's a narrative arc about characters who either are already or get into a drug, and I'm including alcohol in that, you know, and then, you know, you watch their sort of descent into addiction where they are, you know, becoming, you know, their life is unraveling because of their drug use.
One movie I can think of, it's a more of a genre movie, but Deep Cover, the Bill Duke movie, that's Lawrence Fishburne is he's a cop who goes undercover, and the whole backstory of that character is that, like, his dad was a drug addict and, like, got killed in front of him during a robbery, and that's, like, or was it a robbery? I can't remember. It's been a few years since I've seen the movie, but, like, and then he vows, like, never to get into that, but then, of course, he's recruited to go undercover, and that movie is, I think, very much focusing on, like, sort of like how, like, his white superior is, like, using a black character as, like, an in for the world, and, like, you know, into this underworld. And, you know, Lawrence Fishburne, I think, even has, like, a line where he says to, like, Charles Merton Smith, who's, like, plays the superior, he says, like, why are you using, you know, why don't you do any of this? And then, like, Charles Martin Smith says, like, are you kidding? I went to Princeton to avoid that shit or whatever. And, like, it's very much getting at the privilege of that. And then, like, you know, Fishburne does like get into deep and everything, and does get sort of wrapped up in this world and everything. So that's an example, and that Deep Cover is just like a great movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, highly recommend it. But
very good.
Yeah. Sorry, if we want to continue down this point, I'll defer to you, to the three of you. But if not, yeah. Do we have anything else we want to say about this? That's what I was more asking.
I'm good.
One thing that I did want to say with the Brad, you talking about like this movie almost like kind of delighting in like watching his character's downfall. I feel like this is, if I'm going to mention this is probably the best point to mention it. In the mid 2000s, there was like a series of like anti-meth PSAs that were filmed, like, and I think maybe they were shown on TV, but they got like pretty high-profile directors to direct them, including Alejandro González Iñárritu, Alfonso Cuarón, Wally Pfister. I think Tony Kaye did, and then Aronofsky was one of them. And this movie, and like the one of the like the ads would like show like basically like how characters like how people like get addicted to meth, and like there's like one where like I think it's a girl who's like sitting on it's honestly kind of not similar from like Requiem for a Dream, where like a girl is like shown on a motel bed while like a guy's like leaving, like on like buckling up his pants, and then like her boyfriend comes in while it's playing, like showing this really awful situation. She has like a whole voiceover monologue about like, oh, my boyfriend really loves me and cares about me, he's like the most caring, loving person I know, when of course we're seeing like, oh, it's not the case. It's like ironic, very kind of like broad ironic juxtaposition, which you do get a lot of, I think, in this movie, Requiem for a Dream. There's like the scene where in the whole like climax of the movie, when like there's like it's like an awful scene, but like while like Marlon Wayans is like churning potatoes and being told to like mash them nice and easy, I think that's like either shown before, after, or during Connolly with the ass-to-ass dildo scene, which like I'm like thinking that's like so crass, like to show that in that way. Like it has like kind of that tone. It is. The PSAs very broad, and I don't think, and this is like also not really maybe Aronofsky not understanding the addiction. I think like he does draw sort of like, it's like not a perfect 1-to-1 ratio in the way that he edits like heroin shooting, the way that like Ellen Burstyn shown flipping on her TV and like a series of rapid edits. They make it look like TV addiction and heroin addiction are kind of like the same thing, like as they are shown in the same way, or like he draws like equivalence between them, and I feel like that's like not quite the same, especially because you don't go to jail for like watching TV all day, whereas like if you get caught like shooting heroin all day, you do go to jail. But like anyways, I'm sorry if I'm like dunking too hard on this movie and maybe like going off on like changing the subject a little bit too much, but that's, I think I'll stop now for now. But yeah,
right. And yeah, if you got thrown in the slammer for watching TV all day, I'd be a felon. Sorry.
TV party tonight.
Yeah.
TV party tonight.
Right. And what Brad was talking about how she lays in the bed and the snacks and whatnot are flying at her, and I do like that scene because, one, it is supposed to be funny, and it's also supposed to be like, you can't be addicted to food. This is so funny. And then by the end of it, you're just like, oh, it got so bad that this had to happen. And it's both just saying addictions to this or to sugar is equivalent to this, is equivalent to this. And I mean, but the thing is, it's not necessarily addiction to television. She's addicted to Tabby Timmons telling her she can change her life and she can do, if she were to just do this, she could change. And all she's trying to do is impress her son. And that's what hits the hardest for me. But yeah, I do like that, how like whenever she takes the pills, it's just like, I can eat anything, and there's conga music playing and whatnot, because it's just, if it was a heroin needle, that would not be funny, but because it's supposed to be, like funny and whatnot. And then when she takes the pills, and it's like kind of just like, oh, she's like, she's got a little bit more energy, and then she's like, oh, it's getting kind of bad here. It's just like heroin, you already know it's bad. It's not like, oh, he did too much heroin. It's like heroin is heroin. Okay. I do not know knowledge about the pills that she was taking, if she would have stayed on the regimen, blah, blah, blah. But it is showing that you already have an idea what heroin is, but it's trying to implement that, being addicted to something else which is what they all are. They're all striving for a dream, blah, blah, blah. But the addiction to not being where you are right now is just as deadly as this and this and this. And I know that can also come by as fake deep and whatnot. It's just like, well, actually they're addicted for a better life in any way they can get it. But that's what I love. It's I think the ending is very necessary. If that was not in there and they all just like kind of just like went to the hospital and it was just like, oh, I'm never going to use heroin again. No. It would not feel the same. I'm not saying that, if it was a little bit softer ending that people would like it. It's just like it lives and dies by the ending. If you take it out, people would still not like it. If you left it in, people will not like it because of how out there it is and whatnot.
There is a true to life element of the way Ellen Burstyn's character, accidentally becomes addicted to drugs, where she's taking these uppers that are diet pills, and really it's speed that like a high powered speed that's supposed to suppress her appetite basically.
And she got it from a doctor, so how can it be bad?
Yeah, and so I think you see that true to life with the opioid crisis. 100%. A lot of people who, were just prescribed, Percocet and all those types of drugs who, did not, doctors were told it's not addictive. Patients were told it's not addictive, explicitly. These pharmaceutical companies, Purdue and the like, literally sued anyone they could find who said it was addictive in order to back up their claim that it wasn't. And clearly it was, and clearly it created a lot of people who just were following the doctor's orders. They trusted their doctor and took these meds. They took them for the prescribed amount, and then they said, like, I need more. I still need more, because they made the jump to heroin.
Right. We don't know if Ellen Burstyn's character is actually like, because when she decides to take more than her amount, we don't know if she just needs more, because she's also looking at Tabby Timmons and keeps thinking about it, and she doesn't know it. You can't tell if she's addicted or just wants to speed up getting on the television, because she's also waiting for the mailman and opening up and just wants to hurry up and expedite the process. You can't really tell, at least I can't, if she's addicted or she's like, well, if I just I'm sorry if I sound stupid, but
you're not. I will just say from personal experience, I am on Adderall. I've been prescribed on Adderall for years, and there was a period of time in college where I just kept upping my dose because I kept getting adjusted to it, and then I wanted that, that rush that you get. And
right. Oh, sorry to cut you off, but I just remembered that she calls the doctor and she was like, well, it's just not working anymore. And they were just like, it's fine. Yeah. It's just working into your system. Mm-hmm. So she's also just like, well, what happened to me being happy and whatnot? And, I want that high again. So actually, maybe she is that, but also just wants to hurry up and be able to fit in the red dress.
Because she's on a kind of Adderall drug, and the first time you take like a dose of Adderall, you're like, oh shit, like, I feel like, oh my god. And then once you're
feel like cleaning the whole place in 30 minutes.
Yeah. Sorry, Charlie, I didn't mean to step on your toes there, but like once you're on it regularly, it's a part of your day. You don't feel it. You're just like normal, but it is having an effect. You're just like,
which is exactly why I got off of it for a while, because I was abusing it, and my psychiatrist was like, yeah, this is like too much, and I was in school and I was drinking and smoking too much. And, and then I got to a point where I was like I got off of it and I wasn't functioning, because I'll just throw it out there, I have ADHD, and, it doesn't just work as like, it works more as an antidepressant for me more than anything. And I will say, once I got back on it, I'm on a low dose, and I will never, ever raise the dose ever again because of that experience I had in college. It's been several years now. I'm like fine, but like that, I think as I've gotten older, that I saw, like, obviously I'm not her age nor am I a woman, but I did see a little bit of my own like struggle with even prescribed Adderall from my doctor and like abusing that a little bit. That does feel real. There were times where I just would not stop chattering my teeth or clenching my teeth, or like I didn't get on it to the point that I hallucinated or anything like that. But I do talk to my roommate, who is a clinician at a group home, says that he, because I was talking to him about this, and he's kind of in the middle with all of us, where he's like, I think the performances are great. I think the way it's shot and edited is something he just doesn't vibe with, which is totally understandable. But he thinks that Ellen Burstyn's portrayal is like incredibly realistic, and is like, I've dealt with patients who have taken that much speed to the point that they just go that they fall into that kind of rabbit hole. So I'm curious why you think Ellen Burstyn's performance is so bad, Brad, because I think many people who don't even like this movie, I've rarely heard people talk negatively about her performance. So I'm curious what issue you have with it.
It felt, I mean, that's interesting to hear, because it felt like a caricature to me. It felt like a caricature of someone who's falling into this hole to me. And one thing I would mention, is like I do think that both her and Jared Leto are putting on pretty bad attempts at like a Jewish Brooklyn accent. Neither of them are Jewish, but they're trying to sort of sound like they are Brooklyn Jews, and it just doesn't. That just sounds wrong to my ears. Like it's clearly affected. So that's sort of the lead-in where I'm like, that's not your accent. You're not Jewish. And then from there, I just sort of, it feels to me like that the performance is such a over the top type of attempt to be tug at the heartstrings. But I mean, it's interesting to hear if he doesn't want his name on the podcast, your roommate saying that he sees that as very realistic. So I'll definitely consider that for sure. Like I guess in some ways it appears over the top in the film, but maybe there is elements there. So I'll give it that. Like I won't downright say that it's terrible, but like
1, 2, 3. We got Brad. He loves the movie now. The match is over.
No, but I mean, I think because I think that it's all in the way that she's directed and edited. Like even if you don't, and her performance is edited. Like I mean, I guess my question is, like, the movie's already it starts at 10 and goes to, like, 42 by the end of the movie. Like, it's not like Gus Van Sant's Last Days, which is, like, so static and so, which is a great movie also about addiction, but it is the complete opposite of this, where shots will just last for, like, 20 seconds after he's out of the frame or something like that. So I guess that's kind of why I was, like, kind of shocked to hear that you hate her performance, because it's, like, even if you don't, I mean, the accent, that makes sense. If you can't vibe with that, I don't mind it, but I can understand where you're coming from with that. But, like, she's on the same level as the film in terms of, like, the acting styles of everyone and what the film is trying to aim for aesthetically. Sure.
She said she took her, when she met Aronofsky's mother, she took her accent from her. Pretty much.
I mean, I can tell. Like, the thing is, like, that's fine. I can tell she's putting it on. Right. Is all. Maybe that's just to my ears. I'm just
even the scene. I'm curious what your take is, because like the one scene that the entire movie slows down, no score, close up on a face, is of when Jared Leto comes to visit her, and there is that extended close up of how she talks about how lonely she is, and. It's funny.
No fancy editing. No the only thing editing. That's in that is they cross the line when he turns around and is trying to figure out where the noise is at. Like that's
really heightened sound effects of like the clenching jaw and everything. Like
that's the one thing. But after that, because it eventually breaks with that, and then it is just on her face, and like. I know this is going to sound weird, but there were times during lockdown last year where I kept thinking about that line where she's like, why should I make the bed or do the dishes? Why?
It's so fucking sad.
I relate to that, where I've dealt with depression before, where I just can't get out of bed every day, or why am I doing this? I think that it comes from a real place of pain and loneliness that, I mean, that feels real to me. And is it manipulative? Of course it is, but it's just... I feel like that's easily the most human part of it.
Yeah, it's just honest to me.
It just comes off as like, and on top of that, I think there's kind of a heartbreaking turn that she has where she goes, I like the way I feel. I like feeling this way. Like, because basically, she doesn't know she's acting this way. It takes Jared Leto to basically be like, Mom, have you been lifting weights? Like, what's going on here? And she's just so excited to see him, and instead she's being, it sounds like she's taking his concerns as criticisms and then pushing back, which is what a lot of addicts do when,
Sure.
they are called out.
I'm not on speed. The doctor prescribed him for,
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is, like, that's why I think it makes it so heartbreaking. It's not like she's like the rest of them. She literally is like, he's a doctor, of course. Like, it's fine. Like, and then, of course, the irony that Jared Leto can't tell her why he knows. And, like, I mean, it's not said, but he feels like a total hypocrite about the whole thing. So,
yeah, I think her monologue it gets me every time, and I'm not in her position where I feel that way, but I'm in Jared Leto's position. I definitely, when he, is obviously meaning to leave and he doesn't want to, but he like has to, and then he's crying in the cab, like, that's the best part of the movie for me, definitely. But yeah.
And it is funny, I will say, like I said before we started talking about it, it's funny how, like, this is the type of movie where, and if it's, if it emotionally works for you, it works for you. If it annoys you, it's just going to annoy you. It doesn't try to get on any other level other than the one that it is on, and it keeps ramping everything up. So I think it's just a matter of, like, whether you... Because I feel like a lot of why I'm saying I love this movie are all based on emotional reactions that the film is so clearly trying to milk from me, and I am aware of that, but it is kind of a movie about... It is a capital M movie where it's not even trying to be... I mean, I'd argue that it is trying to capture real emotions from addiction. In terms of, like, how drugs actually make you feel, I think it is not that at all, but, like, in terms of, like... Well, I guess... I do think that the Ellen Burstyn stuff works in particular with that aspect in terms of, like, other instances. Like, I know that the film is so stylized to the point that, like, there are times where it even is calling out how, I mean, there's that scene of, like, Jennifer Connelly in her bathroom and there's, like, a purple glowing light, like, coming through her door that almost seems, like, supernatural, as if, like, the void from Poltergeist is back there. So it is kind of, like... always aware of how much of a movie it is and how artsy and stylized and over the top it is, which is why I think it also rubs people the wrong way so much, is because it isn't always in it isn't always in a type of hyper reality.
Yeah. It is very much a movie, and I mean that's why I love it. Like, I don't love it just because of the emotional stuff, because there's a screen up for me because I'm not relating to the addicts and whatnot. Like I said, if it was just purely from a movie standpoint, it's just like everything that I love. It's all of the capital M movie stuff of all the stuff he's deploying in the editing and all of that. That's why I love that above everything. So, and
it is a question for me where I tend to like that type of, like maximalist type of, over the top filmmaking. I don't really mind performances that are off kilter or over the top or, unconventional or just not naturalist most of the time. So it is kind of like trying to sort of explain why I have problems with this movie, but don't have problems with XYZ movie that is in like a similar vein is definitely a challenge. But sometimes it is sort of, when you see it, or
literally everything
doesn't quite
that
click.
I'm saying that I like about this film, I think I used against Spencer, for example, which is also dealing with some addiction stuff. And it is like, I'm like, it's just Kristen Stewart. It's not Princess Diana. She's just suffering the whole time. And like, then there's this stupid happy ending where I'm just kind of like, but everything I'm saying I don't like about that movie, I'm praising this one for. And they're two completely different type of styles. So maybe that's not fair. Oh, yeah. But that movie is also pretty maximalist and very blunt and over the top. And it's
not like this though.
Oh, not like this.
Did you notice that in the end of Spencer, the kids have seatbelts on, but she doesn't?
Yes, I did notice.
Oh
that.
my fucking! That sounds terrible. Is that? I'm so glad I haven't seen this movie yet.
I like it. I like it.
I like Spencer. I thought it was good.
I love Kristen Stewart so much, and it bummed me out that I did not care for that movie, and I don't think any of it's her fault, though. I think it's all in the direction. But anyway, this is not here or there. My point is that I'm like, there are certain movies where especially now as I've gotten older, I am sick of movies like misery porn. I think I am sick of filmmakers who do clearly get off on inflicting trauma and pain onto their characters. Example, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu films drive me fucking insane. Like, I think he's the type of person who just gets off on pain and suffering for no reason. We'll have a woman get raped against a tree for no reason in The Revenant and then have her cut his balls off. What does that have to do with anything? Oh, so Leonardo DiCaprio can save her and it proves like he's a good person, where I'm just like, I guess I'm getting a little off topic here, but like, I guess it is something that is like, for me, it makes me, talking about this movie has made me wrestle with my own self as a critic and like, how I can be objective about how I think every single criticism is valid, and I'm holding on to a feeling. I'm holding on to a nostalgia for a movie that made me feel everything when I was a teenager and didn't know how the world worked yet and didn't know how drugs worked yet. So it is that thing that I'm trying to point out. Like, I know a lot of what I'm saying is great about the movie is basically like, it made me feel things, which I'm aware of. It's just one of those things where I can't pluck that from my heart. Just, I can't do it,
And I'm aware that I'm making a lot of value judgments against a movie, bearing in mind that one of the screenwriters, the author of the novel, has is writing this from personal experience, and that a lot of people do take it on that a personal level and do see value in it. So I'm definitely coming at it bearing that in mind as well, that there's a lot of people who have much closer experience than I do with this stuff, who see value in it, but I still don't click with the movie, and I think from just from my perspective, I don't think it works. But I also understand both having that emotional connection, seeing yourself in it, seeing just sort of a value in it. So like, I definitely feel that as well. So I guess just I would put that out there as my disclaimer, that like, I don't pretend to be an expert on any of this matter, but just my personal feelings and my takeaway from the film are what they are. And I've tried to just express
and
that.
I feel like everyone's doing that right now. Yeah. I guess it's because whenever you or Bryden have brought up something that is critical of it, I'm kind of like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, yep, I can't really defend all of this. I mean, especially as we've talked about, like the unintentionally tone deaf handling of racial issues is something that particularly stuck out to me this time. But I can't deny that, like, these bold aesthetic decisions just, it sounds like, I mean, Kevin, you're clearly in the same boat. It's like, they annoyed you and they enthralled us, and that's kind of like where we come down to it. And ultimately, it's so, I know it's funny how, like, I feel like this was a universally beloved film when it came out, and now it is like so divisive and so like the people who hate this film really, really hate this movie, and I can see why. And like, it's I don't know where I'm going with this. Someone stop me.
No, I wonder if it's maybe because of Aronofsky's later output. Maybe that colors it somewhat. I don't know. That could be potentially something, because this was only his second film. Maybe like he was like still like, people were like thinking, oh, like, let's see where this guy goes from here. But
like, even stuff like, I mean, The Wrestler, where people were like, finally he's calmed down and he's made like a movie about actual adults, and then he made Black Swan, which I think is his best movie because it utilizes all of the things that all of his over-the-top tendencies to make a beautifully trashy De Palma film that's stealing from a lot, but the thing is, people can also be like, that's just Perfect Blue or The Red Shoes or stuff like that, and like, yeah, it is, but like, it works. I don't know, like, it's so, that movie is silly in the ways that this movie can unintentionally be, but it's in a genre pick where I think, Brad, it sounds like most of your complaints, and your complaints, Bryden, are about, since this is such a serious issue, and it's made to feel like a PSA dare. That's why it feels exploitative to you. So, I don't know. I feel like I just summed up everything that we just said without making any new points, but I'm trying to, like...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I really have anything more to say other than I feel like the aesthetics of this movie kind of, like, emphasize for me how hollow I feel like this movie is on, like, a story and character level, which, and, you know, plot isn't everything, but I don't know. I feel like it kind of undermines the movie's approach when, like, and, like, I feel like it's not on the level of, like, the material that, like, I think is calling for a more sensitive hand. And I don't know that I see a whole lot of depth there, especially because I feel like the points that Aronofsky makes about addiction are, like, simplistic and, like, occasionally, like, offensive. But I can also see why, like, some people might enjoy the surface pleasures there, because I do think there is, like I said, I think there is, like, some good location work, like the empty, like, Coney Island theme park, and, like, you know, like the grass growing up through the concrete when, like, they're wheeling the TV across the street. I wish there was more of that. I feel like Aronofsky almost, like, should have let, like, maybe calm down the aesthetics and maybe let some of the actors and, like, the characters and, like, the locations, like, speak for themselves rather than just, like, ramping up the style. I feel like it undermines it for me at least. But I don't know. But I can understand why, on a surface level, this movie can be occasionally intoxicating. But for me, it grows wearing after a little while. But that's my final word on
it. Positive note. I could sing the praises of this movie all day, but we didn't talk about Dylan Baker in his.
I did. I mentioned him as the doctor, I think.
Oh yeah, his face, just the disgust on his face.
It is so. That is a joke, right? They wouldn't just bring Dylan Baker in, of all people, to just come in and be like, ew, and then just grab all the other drugs that
and then take the medicine. Yeah.
Like,
it's amazing. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Almost Major. Please rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Please follow the pod on Twitter at Almost Major to keep up to date with what movies we will be covering in the future. Myself, I can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at KevBonesy. Bryden can be found on Twitter at Bryden Doyle and on Letterboxd at JDoyle. Charlie can be found on Twitter and Letterboxd at CTNash91. Once again, thank you for listening.